everything inside of HBase. Like, it seems like a lot of things you could get outside of HBase with Phoenix itself, and sort of even just strip out, you know, your Solar and UI component, and even Hive as well. Like, is there a plan there? Is that something you thought about?
So that's a good question. The question was, why are we using 3 distinct data stores to back Metron? And so it's a complicated answer. So let's first address HBase. So the reason why HBase is used is primarily for storage of network packets and storage of enrichment. So it's not used as a general purpose data store. It's just used for those specific things. The reason why it's used for storing packets is because we want to be able to construct PCAPs dynamically. So we'd like to be able to scan an HBase table, compile a PCAP, and deliver it to a higher end service. So that's why HBase is used for. So no other component within our stack stores packets other than HBase. With respect to using HBase for enrichment, we needed a fast key value framework to facilitate enrichment. So as our data is going through our pipeline, we want to key on a field and make sure or check if we have any more information about that field. So the best way to do that was a key value store, and we already had HBase because we were using that for packet stores. So we could have brought in Redis, we could have brought in a number of key value stores, but we figured, you know, since we already have HBase and we're a big data solution, and we can use caching to effectively turn this into a near real-time lookup, why not just do it in HBase? So that's where HBase came in. The necessity for having Hive, there are 3 reasons. So one, data in Hive compresses better than data in Elasticsearch or Solar, so you can retain it longer. You can enforce policies and access control on top of the data in Hive, so you can say certain users are able to see parts of the data and have views of the data that certain users cannot. And at the time we were using other proprietary analytics tools that fed off of the data, all of which spoke ODBC, JDBC, and the quickest way to connect them to the data vault and be able to enforce policies for how the data is loaded into these tools and viewed was through this. So this is why the Hive capability is there. And obviously the Solar indexing is for real-time search and threat hunting capabilities. So you need that as well. So that's why those 3 data sources exist.
So are you just using column level protection then in Hive, or what? Can you expand on that a little bit? Like, what are the security features in Hive that you're actually leveraging?
Yeah, so using views, using column level security, things like that.
So if Phoenix had an ODBC driver, you could take over the world essentially.
So we probably could. And keep in mind, the system was made 3 years ago, or
Sure,
first iteration of it.
Forward-looking only.
Yeah. So none of this existed, and a lot of this still doesn't exist today, right? At least not something you could run in production environment.
I'm sorry, what doesn't?
Like the ODBC drivers and
sure.
Phoenix and things like that, right? So.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Going once, going twice? No?
Questions from the back of the room?
Questions from the back of the room? Hey, there we go. Dominic.
Hey guys, can you talk about the challenges of taking the code base that Cisco put out there and how, you know, Hortonworks went one way with it, CapitalOne's over here, maybe ManTech and Rackspace are over there. Can you talk about the challenges of integrating those different directions that people took OpenSock and making that into Metron?
Yeah, so it's been very painful. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. So we had a couple of fairly large merges, and we're probably going to have another 1 or 2 ahead of us. The reason why we went to monthly Apache builds is to sort of speed that up a little bit and start producing sort of normal standard builds more frequently. And be able to incorporate other forks or other branches more rapidly. So the sooner you incorporate them, the less they have a chance to splinter. It's almost, because you provide a flexible framework, if you don't provide governance and transparency and a roadmap for where you're going, it will splinter. So as a part of, one of the main reasons we put this in Apache is so that exists And there's a clear direction, clear governance, and everybody knows where it's going. And there's transparency, so if you want a feature, all you have to do is just file a JIRA in the open source community. The open source communities then become aware that you're working on something, and they either help you get it done, or you can just get it done on your own and contribute back. People will look at it, review it, give you thumbs up, and it'll go into Apache. So that's sort of a complicated answer to answer a complicated question.
Green pastures from here on.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a variation and a follow-on on that question.
We have a different project that I'm working on for the Justice Department that takes many of the same components you're using for Metron. And we're running into this issue of the compatibility of the lower level components. So, Storm uses one flavor of Java, and we're using some open source or not so open source NLP libraries that use a different flavor of Java, and that has a different issue with our Kafka and how we tie all this together. How are you managing all of the subcomponents and the compatibility of those subcomponents across a large stack of open source software?
Because we're Hortonworks, and that's sort of what we do as a platform, right now we're making sure that the things that we know of are interoperable. And obviously the things that we don't know, like if somebody's using some machine learning library that we haven't tested against OpenSoft, or Metron rather, that there's no way for us to know that these issues exist. But right now we're doing code optimization. We're going through our Maven scripts, making sure that the dependencies we're pulling in are consistent, that we're not pulling in various versions of the same things, making sure that, like I'm sure you know, Metron has multiple modules and multiple components that it comes with, making sure that those modules operate against library versions that are consistent. So that is an ongoing effort right now. If you find that it's incompatible with something, it should be as simple as filing a JIRA in Apache to let us know that this incompatibility exists, and then we'll take a look at it.
Great, thanks. Get to you a second, Anderson. I have one question, maybe for Ray or for Karthik or for Adam. I know there's some folks here who are maybe just learning Hadoop or interested in getting into this market. Tell me a little bit about some of the skills that you all are looking for when you're bringing on members to your team. That would be kind of probably a good question for some of the folks here. And then Anderson, I'll get right to you.
So that's I'm glad you asked that question. Part of the idea of leveraging platform and framework and some of the best practices that we're actually building as an abstract on top of that vision of framework at ManTech is to be able to facilitate a more utility type skill set. So you don't necessarily have to be a 3 to 5 year Hadoop person to do some of the fundamental type work that we're doing. Some things that come to mind, and we've talked about in drawing, were simple things like parsers. A lot of basic programming skills to facilitate and help write parsers. There are other points of integration, questions came up around regression testing, integration, functionality, taking requirements, roughing out design, understanding the architecture and how it all fits. So we believe that we have opened up that skill set. There's obviously a big demand for Hadoop folks out there. So part of the driving factor was how do we provide a supply of talent without them having to have 5 and 10 years of Hadoop.
To add on to that, to add on to that, I think it's one of the things we treated that we believe the team is. Can you hear me?
Do you guys want this one?
Talk loud, Karthik. Yeah, to add on to that, I think it's primarily focused on the types of teams you're trying to build up as well. So Hadoop, if you go after Hadoop as a skill set, we all know it's a buzzword, and it's very difficult to find Hadoop engineers who are well versed in all these topologies. Like if you look at what James presented, it's a lot of tools. Right? So we had in the pie chart, we had about 5 different tools for each one of the sections. And if you look at what Adam was presenting, we had to integrate all of them together. So it was about how do you break that skill set apart? How do you find that skill sets to form a team, like people within that field, and putting them together to work on some kind of objective goals, which would be. So Adam joined us about 2-3 months ago right now, 2 months, and the project has been only live for 4 months since we started. We started in September of last year to where we are today. Putting this together on a very, very small team. It's not a large team that we have, but we focused on taking each pie and we focused on developing those skill sets, identifying those skill sets, and if you look at it behind the scenes, it's primarily Java, it's primarily DevOps as a principle, doing good code clean. I'm glad to see that cleaning code is one of the key things in the Metron project, because that's been extensive work which we've been working on as well. Like how do we write